More than 308 billion rand has been allocated to bailing out failing state-owned enterprises. The finance minister saying that government will reduce the continual demands on limited public resources from SOEs. He stressed the need for SOEs to develop and implement sustainable turnaround plans. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Andile Nomlala, the president of the Black Management Forum, and Kganki Matabane, who is with the Black Business Council. Good evening to both of you, gentlemen, and thanks for your time. So the talk about SOEs, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like we've been here before, but whether it's the SONA or the budget, talk about the reform of SOEs, talk about consolidating SOEs, but to date, we have not seen that translate into any practical action. Maybe, Andile, let me begin with you.
Good evening, Kathy, and good evening to your listeners, and thanks for having BMF on your show. Look, listening to the budget, I must say it's quite depressing these days, or in fact anything that government has to say. And it starts with there's always a shifting of the timelines. They're just kicking down the can. Because if you look at, let's just deal with one serious issue here, the ESCOM issue. BMF back in 2018 sat in a BUSA consultative forum. We submitted in 2018 January. We submitted the plans that were highly collated in terms of the thoughts and the understanding of what needs to be done at ESCOM. To date, in the announcement that the finance minister made, is still shifting down is still kicking down the can. The reality is that there is evidence. It's quite evident now that there's no clear and well thought through plan on how to deal with ESCOM. You can't 4 or 5 years down the line, since the ESCOM war room was created, you still have no concrete plan of what you want to do. But let's say that this time around they are serious. The question is, what is it that they're going to do? Because in the budget, it's not clear even the restructuring of ESCOM. It's not clear even the capacity of the management team at ESCOM is now not clear, and you know BMF's position on under-derater. But even the re-look at the debt problem at ESCOM is still not clear to date. So you don't want to talk about the rest of the SOEs, because ESCOM is a lifeblood of our economy. If you are not serious in dealing decisively and adequately with ESCOM, what else can you do to save the economy? The other SOEs, I know Transnet is a critical SOE, PASA is a critical SOE, but there hasn't been a concerted effort to deal with ESCOM. PASA is in doldrums, we all know that, and the budget is not clear, it's not definitive. It's not saying anything that needs to be done on the financial front, let alone that the SONA was not clear as well on what needs to be done from the planning point of view. So for us, Kathy, I think these guys, Bakangela, Isitya, Bumyamen, I can tell you.
All right, so no silver linings then for the BMF. Black Business Council, Mr. Matabane?
Evening, Kathy, and the viewers, and thank you very much for inviting us. The biggest challenge of government is implementation. If for example, you hear about the rationalization of SOCs, this matter was raised more than 5 years ago, and no one can show you how many SOCs have been rationalized as we speak. Our worry is that the budget is a right step is a step in a positive direction, according to ourselves. But will all these things be implemented? For example, the minister spoke about the public procurement bill, and remember, the public procurement bill was released for public comments in 2020. The closing date was June 2020. Now we're sitting in 2022, February. And the minister said the bill will be tabled before Parliament in the financial year 2022-2023, which can be any time between April of this year and March of 2023. So for us, it tells us that there's no agency in trying to create, to use state procurement, create opportunities for black business, opportunities for women business, opportunities for youth business, and people living with disabilities. The president, every year in August, when he addresses the Women's Month functions, he says he wants to basically set aside 40% of the procurement, state procurement for women. And we've raised this many times with the president that until this is in law, whatever the president says is not going to happen, because the procurement officers are basically using the law when they implement anything. So anything that is just a speech is not in legislation, won't happen. So our worry is that there's a lot of talk on one side, but there's very, very little implementation and agency in implementing such important intervention for black people as the public procurement bill, for example.
I want to talk about the issue of jobs, because through this allocation that has been given by government towards initiatives that are going to create jobs, there seems to be some acknowledgement that there must be something done about the job situation. But of course, we also juxtapose it against what the president said in his State of the Nation address, that, government should create the environment, business should really be the ones creating the jobs. So given the fact that today has happened, Andile, in your view, what then does the future of job creation in this country look like? And realistically, this 24.8 billion rand allocated towards jobs, how far can it go?
Firstly, Kathy, let's be pleased with the fact that there's a budget linked to creating jobs, contrary to what we've had at the SONA when the president said government doesn't create jobs. Maybe the 24 billion will be for enabling environment. But look, Kathy, it's been always a belief of BMF. The problem we have in our country, especially with the issue of unemployment, is just as basic as anything else, but the concentration of productive capacity of our country to a selected few businesses that are predominantly led by white males in our country. If you look at what is the concentration of the GDP between public sector and private sector, 70 to 80% of our GDP is vested in the private sector. And Kganki just mentioned now that government is struggling to put a decisive, clear plan that will deal with advancing the creation of black business within the public sector alone with the public procurement bill. Now, imagine if we were to make significant inroads in the value chain of private sector companies. How much more of black businesses that can be created to leverage the opportunities of the big conglomerates that you find in the private sector, just on issues of import substitution, for instance. You produce things that you need the most in South Africa that have higher job creation potential in South Africa. And you then allow or almost enforce through legislation and regulation that private sector must procure from black businesses. Now, if you were to create an enabling environment that would resuscitate and bring a resurgence of black-owned businesses just to participate at an SMME level, you will have a plethora of jobs. Now you're not going to have a growing economy when there's only a selected few people that are participating in creating, that are participating in the productive side of our economy, which is the capital side. Now, look at Regulation 28, Kathy, that was mentioned. Regulation 28 has been earmarked to be used to drive infrastructure investments. But you're still leaving that to an open-ended case where the issue of transformation, when you ignited the resurgence of renewable energy sector, for instance, there were transformation imperatives that were never met. When you issue the spectrum, for instance, there are transformation imperatives that were never met. So if you don't, Kathy, if you don't bring black people into economic participation on the productive side, not just the consumption side of the economy, then you're never ever gonna solve the problems of economy in our country. And this is not without the ability, the skills, and the zeal of black entrepreneurs. There are black entrepreneurs in our country. Government spoke about the bounce back guarantee scheme. Again, it's a thumbsuck thing that they sit somewhere alone and design, and then they think that is going to fit for the entrepreneurs. If you were to ask Treasury, who do they consult? Which SMMEs and platforms that people who would need that loan guarantee scheme and therefore design and model it to suit them? They will tell you they haven't. So you sit as an official who never ran any business anywhere, and you decide how a certain business must be helped. And you think that is going to be productive. We had the 200 billion, it's now lowered to 20 billion. So these things, Kathy, you could just tell that people wake up in the morning and dream about them and go and write them down, and they know that in next year's time, they're not going to be accountable. We had 200 billion loan guarantee scheme. No one is accountable about what happened because it was a thumbsuck thing that was done amongst people who wakes up and dream about something and write it in the budget.
Mr. Matabane, let me bring you in here because what Andile is speaking to is that effectively, if there are no lessons being learned, even from something like the failed loan guarantee scheme, then some of the projects that keep receiving monetary investment will not have the desired result and therefore will not respond to the challenges that this country is facing.
Kathy, we've got a crisis. We're sitting on a time bomb as a country. And then what one would have thought that all the efforts will basically be directed towards job creation and sustaining the current jobs that we have. But jobs are a result of economic activity. So the target actually should be to create more entrepreneurs or to support more entrepreneurs, because jobs are going to be created by entrepreneurs. So setting up a target of jobs maybe is not the right measurement. You're supposed to be saying we're targeting 2 million entrepreneurs or enterprises, because if you create 2 million enterprises, each of them hire 3 people, already you've got 6 million people who are going to be employed. And that's basically what we've been saying. We've been saying that let's create an enabling environment as government where black people will have access to funding and then will have access to the market. So access to the market can be, you can use the public procurement bill to open the access to the market using the massive state procurement that they have. So on the other side of funding, Andile has touched on the issue of what now is now called small business loan guarantees, and that has failed. The only positive thing that the minister has included there is the non-banking small and medium loan providers, because we've been saying bring the people who are dealing with small business on a daily basis to participate in this environment so that they can be able to help small businesses. I think that's the only positive. But the other thing, the criteria, we don't know who developed the criteria. People were sitting in an air-conditioned environment trying to talk about small businesses issues without having a clue of what they're talking about. The second issue is that the minister said by April they'll come up with what is called business equity linked loan guarantee support mechanism. But there are no details. We have not been consulted, but this is supposed to target black business, women-owned business, youth-owned businesses. But the people who are at the forefront of this business are not spoken to. So,
all right.
My worry, they're going to come up with something else that is not practical, which then is not going to help us to create enterprises, and as a result, we won't be able to create jobs and grow the economy.
Mr. Matabane and Mr. Nomlala, we're going to have to leave it there for tonight. Thank you both for your contribution.